Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
It was getting to the point where I could almost feel the weed whacker buzzing in my hands, not for the usual landscaping tasks, but maybe aimed right at the forehead of one of those HOA board members. I mean, who actually enjoys dealing with these self-appointed monarchs in miniature kingdoms, all eager to rule over every square inch of land that's not theirs, with taxes disguised as dues and a dozen rules just to make sure no one could ever feel too comfortable? So here I am, the landscape contractor for this massive HOA condo development in New York, tasked with keeping up the place for over 100 units. You'd think keeping lawns trimmed and plants neat would be pretty straightforward. You mow, trim, maybe throw in a little seasonal flower here and there if they're willing to pay, but that's not what they hired me for. Nope. Apparently my job is to jump through hoops for an endless stream of demands from the newly formed Landscape Committee. And let's not even dive into the chaos that is this so-called committee. It's exactly what you'd expect. 3 retired Karens with too much time and too little sense, absolutely ecstatic to find a new way to fill their days. I can practically see them, parked around someone's pristine dining room table, floral teacups in hand, nodding over every new rule they dreamed up to improve the property. They email me non-stop, each with the same question, as if they're in some kind of ridiculous race to see who can irritate me fastest. "Have you completed the weed control on the east side yet?" one will ask, and the next one sends an identical email 2 minutes later. The third will chime in a few hours later with, "Why haven't you replied to my email? God forbid I miss a response to any one of them." Suddenly I'm unprofessional or non-communicative. It's like they're looking for ways to nitpick. I'll get emails at night, early in the morning, sometimes 2 or 3 that demand a reply within an hour. And they want estimates on everything. "How much for a few new shrubs?" they'll ask. I reply with my usual, "Please let me know what type of plants you'd like," and think that'll do it. But 6 hours later, I'm getting frantic emails asking why I'm delaying, as if they don't realize I'm waiting on their response. I go through the motions, politely explaining that I need their list before I can provide an estimate. And what do I get back? An angry message saying, "We need that estimate now." Honestly, you'd think they were paying me by the minute with how frantic they get. It's a circus. One Karen complaining that I didn't respond fast enough, another nitpicking every minor thing my team does. The emails pile up faster than I can clear them. These folks are in my inbox so often I might as well forward my home address. But it's not just the committee Karens. No, there are individual Karens lurking all over the development. A few of them have made it their personal mission to watch every move my crew makes, analyzing every cut, every trim, every blade of grass. One woman, I'll just call her Karen Prime, actually filed multiple work orders because one of my guys accidentally grazed her siding with the weed whacker. Now, mind you, there wasn't a scratch on the thing, but oh, she saw it, and that was enough for her. She cornered me one day, practically shaking with excitement over her discovery. "I saw one of your guys hit my siding with the weed whacker," she announced, her voice at full volume as though she'd just cracked the case of the century. I tried to keep it professional, nodding, apologizing, the whole 9 yards. "I'm really sorry about that," I said. "Could you send me a picture of the damage? I'll make sure it's fixed right away." Her face twisted as if I'd just asked her to take the siding off herself. "Well," she huffed, "there is no damage, but they hit it, and I've already reported this to the HOA. What do you even say to that?" I just stared at her, hoping she'd take the silence as a cue to move along. But no, she just stood there, probably expecting some grand apology for the insult her siding had endured. And of course, Karen Prime wasn't done. The next day, I got 3 emails from her detailing the whole incident, as if her siding had been attacked by a gang of hooligans. Then the HOA committee Karens got involved, sending their own follow-up emails, and I knew this was never going to end. They wanted me to submit a damage report, provide before and after photos, and offer a timeline for repairs. And all of it, every single bit, over a non-existent scratch on the siding. It didn't stop there. Another one of these condo Karens caught me one morning as I was going over the day's schedule with my crew. She marches right up, clutching her dog's leash as if it's some kind of authority badge, and says, "Why is my grass still wet in the mornings?" I thought she was kidding at first, but no, her face was deadly serious. "You're watering the grass too much, and it's making my dog's paws dirty," she said, glaring as if I'd personally drenched her lawn that morning. I tried my best not to laugh. Well, ma'am, the sprinklers are on a timer set by the HOA to run in the early morning, and that's what keeps the grass looking so green. She stared at me, unimpressed. That's unacceptable. You need to adjust the timing so the grass is dry by the time I walk my dog. I nodded along, all the while wondering how many ways she thought I could control morning dew. Then, as if by clockwork, I got another email later that day, reminding me of the sprinkler issue and CCing the entire landscape committee, as if that was going to make me magically control the weather. It's every little thing with these people. I'm starting to think that if I put in new flowers, they'd complain that the petals were too bright, or if I painted a fence, they'd whine that the paint wasn't drying fast enough. Every time I finish one task, I get at least 3 more emails from the Karens saying, "Could you just take a look at one more thing?" They don't realize, or maybe they do, and they just don't care, that my team has a dozen other properties to manage. They act like they're my only client, like my entire world revolves around their hedges and their grass. And just when I think they've run out of things to complain about, they find something new. One of them, Karen number 2 I'll call her, complained that the mulch wasn't arranged correctly. I couldn't even begin to figure out what that meant. "Is it covering all the flower beds?" I asked her. "Well, yes," she said, looking irritated, "but it's not balanced, as if I'm supposed to have a degree in mulch symmetry." I managed to keep a straight face and said, "I'll let the crew know to adjust it next time." But I knew that no matter what I did, she'd have another problem with it soon enough. By the time I get home, I'm half expecting another email to pop up on my phone with some new crisis. And without fail, it does. Another urgent reminder from the committee. Could I possibly attend the next HOA meeting to discuss the landscaping? Because apparently, it's not enough to spend my day replying to their emails and trying to decipher what balanced mulch might mean. They want me to sit in a room with all 3 of them, face to face, so they can air their grievances in stereo. So I show up to this meeting, thinking maybe I'll finally be able to explain how landscaping works, get them to understand the difference between real issues and imaginary ones. But no, the moment I walk in, I'm bombarded with questions, accusations, and bizarre complaints. Karen Prime's front and center, waving some printed email as if it's proof of a crime. She starts by listing all the things I'd apparently done wrong that month, half of which I'm certain are just figments of her imagination. The other 2 are nodding along, throwing in their own complaints, talking over each other, and barely giving me a chance to answer. "You never sent us the list of recommended plants," one says. "But I did," I reply. "It was in the email last Tuesday." They shake their heads, insisting I must have missed something, as if they didn't delete it from their inbox 10 minutes after reading it. I can feel my patience slipping, and all I want is to get out of that room without saying something I'll regret. They move on to the siding incident, and I explain once again that there was no damage. But Karen Prime's nodding so hard I think she's going to sprain her neck. "We'll be watching," she says, as if I'm about to go weed whacker happy on every condo in the complex. Finally, after what feels like hours, they start winding down. They give me a parting speech about how they expect better, and I nod along, barely listening. As I walk out, they remind me that they'll be checking in regularly, and I know that my inbox is about to get even fuller. By the time I'm back in my truck, I'm already wondering how soon I can start looking for another contract, because I don't know how anyone could put up with this. And every time I hit reply to one of their emails, every time I try to explain the simplest thing, I feel like I'm right back in that room with 3 Karens who are convinced the world revolves around their condo development. This right here is the answer. I have several customers that are landscape contractors. They've been down the same road. They only accept communications from the HOA president. They will not talk to or conduct business with or anything with anybody else in the community except for the president or person in charge of the association. Tell employees not to talk or recognize anyone else in the community. You tell them any problems or concerns you need to speak to the owner of the company. End of story. Yeah, man, I do a lot of 1099 contract work on the side, and communications correspondence hours are absolutely a billable item. Similar issue with a client who had a dedicated PM and a small team of salary on project. They'd all email call me independently and a ton. My rate for calls is the same as my rate for work. Consulting is consulting. Time is time, no matter how it's done. So there was a $8,000 correspondence line on my invoice that month. Also had the note scanned as a PDF from each call as evidence if needed. The best comment I've seen that you could actually do is this. I have a friend who did this due to getting similarly harassed from some housing committee. not HOA but very similar. He arranged the contract in the exact fashion as the previous one, with a clause stating contact hours, methods, etc., managing to squeeze like $1,700 before the committee noticed why they received such a drastic price increase. Needless to say, he no longer receives more than a few messages a month regarding a 50-plus unit property.
If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day.
We bought that place with such high hopes. It was a charming property tucked into the mountains, promising peace and privacy. The realtor was full of praises for the HOA, kept saying how they took care of everything. From snow removal to maintaining the private roads, it was supposedly all handled. We were handed a neatly printed packet of restrictions and guidelines, and with my limited understanding, it all seemed in order. But I trusted the realtor. I believed she would make sure we were informed, and that everything we needed to know would be in that packet. In retrospect, that packet should have been the first red flag. It was way too clean, missing any of the marks that would have indicated it had been properly recorded with the county. We didn't realize this until much later, long after we'd built the house and settled in. But let me tell you, the realization hit us hard and late, almost like a betrayal you didn't see coming. The restrictions we'd based all our decisions on, completely unrecorded, unofficial. And apparently the actual restrictions weren't even close to the ones we'd received. The way it all started coming to light was absurdly casual. We were chatting with a neighbor, someone who'd been living there longer than us. We mentioned the restriction packet, and she squinted at us like we were speaking another language. Restrictions? Oh honey, those haven't been followed for years. Haven't you noticed? The road's falling apart. If the HOA was following their own guidelines, we'd at least have some semblance of maintenance. She laughed, but it was the bitter kind of laugh that comes from years of frustration. The dangerous mountain road she was talking about, that was a whole saga in itself. It had been included in the HOA's list of responsibilities, which they were supposedly collecting fees to maintain. But in reality, that road was barely passable in bad weather, riddled with cracks, potholes, and sharp drops along the edge. Every time we drove it, especially during the rainy season, I found myself clutching the wheel tighter, hoping the car wouldn't slip. The next board meeting was where things really escalated. I decided to go and get some answers. I wanted to ask why the road was in such poor shape despite our dues supposedly covering its maintenance. The meeting was in a small community center. A few mismatched folding chairs in a dusty room with one buzzing fluorescent light. It felt about as official as a high school detention room. The board members shuffled in slowly, two of them barely looking up from their phones, another shoving papers around as if to look busy. When they finally acknowledged me, I felt like I was disturbing their social club. I raised my concerns about the road and, in a polite but firm tone, asked why we were paying for maintenance that wasn't happening. The head of the board, a man with a permanent scowl who didn't even introduce himself, barely looked at me as he muttered, "Budget constraints. You know, not everything's so simple as you might think." "Budget constraints," I repeated. "Where exactly is all our money going then?" A silence fell over the room. Finally, another board member, a woman in a blazer that looked 2 sizes too big, chimed in. "Maintenance costs are high, and anyway, people like you don't seem to understand the importance of following protocol. You want things fixed, but you have no idea what's actually involved." "Well, that's why I'm here, asking for answers," I shot back, more than a little annoyed. "If it's too costly to maintain the road, why are we even paying dues for it?" They exchanged glances, and I realized they hadn't expected anyone to press them on it. This HOA wasn't used to being questioned, much less challenged. The scowling man finally cleared his throat and muttered something about consulting the budget, but that was all he was willing to offer. I pressed harder, asking if they could at least provide us with meeting minutes or a copy of the budget. That's when they practically bristled. They gave excuse after excuse. "Oh, those documents are confidential. We don't just hand them out to anyone who asks." It was as if they'd never been asked to be transparent a day in their lives. Leaving that meeting, I realized I wasn't going to get any answers easily. But I wasn't ready to let it go either. Over the next few weeks, I started digging. I called the county office, asked if they had any recorded restrictions for our property, and finally uncovered what I'd dreaded. The restrictions we'd been given weren't the real deal. Our house, the one we'd built carefully to follow every rule we were given, was somehow in violation of the actual restrictions. So we weren't just paying for things we weren't getting. We were paying into an HOA that was practically a ghost organization masquerading as something legitimate. I brought up the discrepancies to the realtor, who practically laughed. She looked at me with that polite but dismissive smile that I could tell she reserved for difficult clients. "Oh, you should have done more research, dear," she said, her tone so condescending it took everything in me to stay civil. "I thought that was your job," I replied, feeling the heat rise in my face. "You gave us those documents. You said they were the rules." She shrugged, clearly unbothered. "HOAs are tricky," she said simply, as if that would resolve it all. "There's only so much I can guarantee, you know." The more I dug, the more I uncovered a mess of paperwork, legal gaps, and missing accountability. I tried calling a lawyer, hoping there was some recourse for the fraudulent documents we'd been given. But of course it had been too long. The statute of limitations had expired. We were just supposed to accept that we'd been duped, pay our dues, and move on. But I couldn't let it go. I started going door to door, talking to other residents, wondering if any of them had gone through the same. Most of them had either given up or, worse, didn't care. A few laughed it off. "Oh yeah, that road's been falling apart since before I moved in," one guy chuckled, leaning against his truck. "I just figure it's part of living up here, ain't worth the hassle to fight 'em." It baffled me how so many people could just ignore what was going on. But I wasn't about to sit quietly. I kept attending board meetings, kept asking for transparency. They grew more hostile, practically shutting me out every time I tried to bring up anything about the budget or the real restrictions. Eventually, I decided I'd go after every record I could. I requested copies of the bylaws, demanded to see the corporate filings and the HOA's liability insurance information. Each time, they pushed back with flimsy excuses or simply ignored me altogether. At one point, they tried to claim that the board members are volunteers and can't be expected to meet every little request. Convenient, wasn't it? To hide behind their volunteer status every time they wanted to dodge accountability. The whole ordeal left me reeling. They couldn't even confirm they had proper liability insurance, nor would they provide any evidence of where our dues went. And when I suggested that I might get the county involved, they laughed me out of the room. They'd clearly been at this a long time, and they knew exactly how to wear down anyone who tried to challenge them. By the end of it all, I was left with the bitter realization that this HOA was nothing more than a money pit, run by people who either didn't care or, worse, were taking advantage of everyone's apathy. We were stuck, tied into this so-called community with restrictions that changed at the whim of whoever sat on that useless board. I learned to be wary of every HOA document, every smiling realtor who promises peace and community. There was no community here, just a handful of people collecting dues and ignoring their responsibilities. And with no way out, we're left watching the road deteriorate, the weeds creep up, and the dues continue to drain us. I'm on the board in my HOA because I don't want Karens to run it as their own personal dictatorship. Anytime someone asks for a copy of the bylaws or deed restrictions, I direct them to the county website. We keep a copy on our webpage, but I always reference the county one first. CC&Rs are recorded, which is a legal term meaning they're in government libers, typically with the county clerk, but other states may do it differently. None of the other documents that you mention are recorded. There may be record retention laws, but that's definitely going to vary state to state as to how long different document classifications have to be retained. The OP is probably using recorded only to apply to the word restrictions, but it's ambiguous, so I want to point that out for others. Don't ask for recorded minutes when considering a property. In NC, the Declaration of Restrictions, what they called them in the 1980s, are recorded by law at the Registrar of Deeds. Yes, they are actually recorded. Right, none of the other docs are there, only they should be in the association records. But the corporate filings should also be up to date with the Secretary of State. Of course, to clarify, if whoever was in charge of the association was keeping our road in order, I wouldn't give a rat's ass. But at this point, I can neither fix it myself, nor do they. But they keep charging me. That's the problem. I mean, run your stupid shit however you want, but do literally the only thing the HOA is tasked to do, maintain the road.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.